Get out of my house." Those 5 words shattered my world. They were the final thing my son said to me before he shoved me into the freezing sleet of a bitter January night and slammed the heavy oak door. I was 70 years old, barely 6 weeks out of major spinal surgery, and my daughter-in-law had just executed a performance worthy of an Oscar. 4 hours later, when the hospital called him, the blood drained from his face. But by then, the avalanche of truth was already crashing down on his wife. I am grateful you are here to listen to this. Before we step into the cold, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below telling me where you are watching from and what time it is there. It helps me feel less alone in telling this difficult story. And, if you haven't already, please subscribe to follow this journey of justice. It is late January now, 2 years since that night. I am sitting in a warm rental home in Chicago, watching the snow pile up against the glass. My phone buzzes on the coffee table. It is a message from Marion. My hand still trembles slightly when I see his name. After 18 months of absolute radio silence, the text reads, "Dad, I know I don't deserve it, but can we talk?" I stare at the screen until the letters swim before my eyes. Do I have the strength to look my son in the eye again? 2 years ago, I thought he was the one person who would always protect me. Let me tell you how everything fell apart. At 70, I was thrown out in a storm because of my daughter-in-law's lie my son never expected, that the truth would survive the cold. It was January 12th, 2024. The clock on the wall read 8:15 p.m. I was living in the guest room of Marion's spacious suburban home in Minneapolis. I had moved in 3 months prior because my recovery from spinal fusion surgery required assistance I couldn't afford on my own. My back was stiff, a constant dull ache that turned into sharp lightning if I twisted the wrong way. Marion was 42, a successful logistics manager who traveled frequently. He had just returned from a 4-day conference in Denver. I heard the garage door rumble open, the familiar sound of his SUV engine cutting off. But before he could even set down his briefcase, the weeping began. It was Chandler, his wife of 3 years. She was 35, impeccable, and calculating. I was sitting in my recliner, reading a paperback, when the front door opened. I expected a greeting. Instead, I heard high-pitched, frantic sobbing coming from the kitchen. "Marion, thank God you're home," she cried, her voice hitching hysterically. "I was so scared." I struggled to get out of the chair, grabbing my walker to steady myself. I wanted to see what was wrong, to help. But as I shuffled into the hallway, the scene laid out before me stopped me cold. Marion stood in the entryway, his coat still on, looking bewildered. Chandler was clinging to him, her face buried in his chest. When she pulled back, the performance escalated. Her blouse was ripped at the collar, exposing her shoulder. There was a fresh, angry red mark on her forearm. Her mascara was smeared artfully across her cheeks. "It was your father," she choked out, pointing a trembling finger toward the hallway where I stood frozen. "I brought him his tea, and he just snapped. He grabbed me, Marion. He tried to force me against the wall." Marion's head snapped up. His eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time in my life, I saw hatred there. "Dad?" he said, his voice low and dangerous. I opened my mouth to defend myself, to explain that I had been reading quietly for 2 hours, but Chandler let out a terrified shriek and recoiled behind Marion. "Don't let him near me," she screamed. "He's crazy." "Son, I haven't left my chair since dinner," I stammered, my heart hammering against my ribs. "I would never touch her. You know me." "The security camera," Marion barked, looking at Chandler. Check the hallway feed. I was so panicked. I think I messed it up trying to save it, Chandler sobbed, burying her face in her hands again. It said, file corrupted when I tried to look. He must have done something to the router. It was a flimsy lie, but anger makes men blind. Marion didn't check the router. He didn't ask to see my phone usage. He didn't consider that I needed a walker just across the room. He looked at his weeping wife, saw the red mark on her arm, and made a choice. He chose her tears over 40 years of knowing his father's character. He marched toward me not as a son, but as an enforcer. He grabbed my arm. The grip was tight, bruising. Marion, please listen to me, I begged. Look at my back brace. I can barely stand, let alone attack someone. Don't you dare lie to me, he roared, his spit flying into my face. I gave you a home. I took care of you. And this is how you repay me? He began dragging me toward the front door. Every step was agony for my healing spine. I stumbled, my feet tangling in the rug, but he didn't slow down. If you have ever been betrayed by your own flesh and blood, if you have ever felt the sharp sting of being discarded by the people you raised, you know exactly how cold that moment feels. It hurts worse than any winter storm. If you believe that our elders deserve dignity and that truth matters more than convenience, please confirm your subscription to the channel right now. By subscribing, you are standing with every silent victim who couldn't tell their story. Marion, it's a blizzard out there, I yelled, panic finally setting in. I don't have my wallet, my pills. You should have thought about that before you put your hands on my wife, he snarled. He opened the heavy front door. The wind howled, blowing ice pellets into the entryway. Chandler stood in the kitchen doorway, watching. For a split second, her sobbing stopped, and a cold, satisfied smirk touched her lips. She had won. Marion shoved me. I didn't have the stability to catch myself. I tumbled onto the concrete porch, landing hard on my hip. The pain was blinding, a white-hot spear shooting up my spine. Stay away from us, Marion shouted. If you come back, I'll call the police. The door slammed shut. The deadbolt slid home with a heavy, final thud. I lay there on the freezing concrete, gasping for air, waiting for the door to open, waiting for him to realize he had made a mistake. But the porch light flickered off. Darkness swallowed me. I was thrown out in a storm because of a lie my daughter-in-law told. My son yelled, "Get out of my house! I don't need a sick dad!" I walked away, with no money or phone. 4 hours later, the hospital called in horror. My son froze when the reality of his actions came back to haunt him. But on that porch, I was just an old man shivering in a thin cardigan. I patted my pockets. No phone, no medication. Just a crumpled $50 bill I kept in my shirt pocket for emergencies. I dragged myself upright using the porch railing, my breath coming in ragged clouds. The temperature was dropping rapidly. It was 5 degrees below zero with the wind chill. I knew the neighborhood well enough to know there was nothing close. The nearest safe haven was the St. Jude Community Center, but that was nearly 4 miles away. 4 miles on ice, with a healing spine and a broken heart. I looked at the dark windows of the house I had built the furniture for. The house where I'd rocked my grandson, who wasn't there that night, to sleep. They were warm inside. I turned my back on them and took the first step into the abyss. The first mile was fueled by adrenaline and disbelief. How could the boy I taught to ride a bike, the man I supported through college, do this? I remembered Marion at 7 years old, crying because he accidentally stepped on a snail. He had such a tender heart then. He used to hold my hand so tightly when we crossed the street. Now, those same hands had thrown me into a death sentence. The wind cut through my thin layers like a razor. My cardigan was soaked within minutes, freezing stiff against my skin. Every step sent a jolt of pain through my lower back, a reminder of the titanium rods holding me together. I passed neighbors' houses, warm yellow light spilling from their windows. I thought about knocking, but shame held me back. What would I say? My son threw me out like garbage? No, I would make it to the center. I had to. By the second mile, the adrenaline faded, replaced by a terrifying numbness. My fingers were useless claws. My feet felt like blocks of wood. The shivering became violent, racking my entire body until my teeth clattered so hard I thought they might crack. I started to hallucinate. I saw my late wife, Martha, standing under a street lamp. She looked sad, beckoning me forward. "Just a little further, Gerald," she seemed to whisper in the wind. "Don't stop. If you stop, you sleep. If you sleep, you die." The physical toll was catastrophic. I slipped on a patch of black ice near a closed gas station. I went down hard, my bad knee smashing into the pavement. I screamed, but the wind tore the sound away. It took me 10 minutes just to get back on my feet. I was crying not from sadness anymore, but from sheer animal suffering. The third mile is a blur in my memory. I don't remember walking it. I only remember the rhythm. Step, drag, step, drag. The cold had moved from my skin to my bones. My thoughts were sludge. I forgot why I was walking. I just knew I had to move toward the lights in the distance. Finally, the silhouette of St. Jude's appeared. The cross on the roof was illuminated. It looked like a lighthouse. I stumbled toward the steps, my body failing. I was 20 feet from the heavy red doors when my legs simply quit. They didn't hurt anymore. They just refused to exist. I collapsed into a snowbank by the entrance. The snow felt strangely warm. A dangerous, comforting heat washed over me. I'll just rest my eyes for a moment, I thought. Just for a minute. The world faded to black. "He's got a pulse. Get the blankets, now!" The voice was distant, echoing down a long tunnel. I felt pressure on my chest, the prick of a needle. Then, heat. Intense, burning heat. I gasped awake in a room blindingly white. The smell of antiseptic assaulted my nose. The steady beep, beep, beep of a heart monitor filled the air. I tried to move, but I was restrained by wires and heavy heated blankets. A woman with kind eyes and graying hair tied in a bun leaned over me. She was wearing a volunteer badge that read, Sylvia. "Mr. Willie? Can you hear me?" "Where?" I croaked. My voice sounded like grinding stones. "You're at Mercy General Hospital," Sylvia said softly. "I found you outside the center. You were barely breathing, Gerald. Your core temperature was 94 degrees. You're lucky to be alive." An hour later, a man in a rumpled suit walked in. He carried a clipboard and looked tired. "Mr. Willie, I'm Mr. Tate, a hospital social worker. We need to ask you some questions about how a 70-year-old man recovering from spinal surgery ends up freezing to death on a sidewalk at midnight." I turned my head away, tears leaking from the corners of my eyes. "I fell," I whispered. "I just went for a walk and got lost." "Mr. Willie," Sylvia interrupted gently, squeezing my hand. "Your emergency contact is your son, Marion. We called him. He said you don't live with him anymore. He sounded shocked that we were calling from the ICU." Mr. Tate stepped closer. The doctors found bruising on your upper arm, shaped like fingers. That didn't happen from a fall. And you have no coat. In January, in Minnesota. Mr. Willie, we are mandatory reporters. If someone did this to you, we have to call Adult Protective Services. This is classified as elder abuse. The words elder abuse hung in the air like smoke. I broke. I told them everything. The accusation, the lack of questions, the physical force, the slamming door. Mr. Tate took furious notes. By morning, a new figure appeared in the doorway. She was sharp, dressed in a navy trench coat, holding a tablet. "I'm Investigator Knox," she said. Her voice was steel-wrapped in velvet. "Mr. Tate briefed me. I specialize in domestic cases involving vulnerable adults. I want to help you, Gerald, but I need you to be brave." "My son," I started. "Your son is an accessory right now," Knox said bluntly. "But the instigator appears to be your daughter-in-law. I've already pulled your medical records. I need your permission to dig deeper." "Do whatever you have to do," I said, closing my eyes. Investigator Knox moved with terrifying efficiency. She sat by my bed and reviewed my surgical notes. "Your surgeon's report from 6 weeks ago states you have a lifting restriction of 5 pounds, Knox noted, tapping her screen. "It also says your range of motion for twisting is less than 10 degrees. Yet, Chandler claims you grabbed her, which requires grip strength you currently lack in your right hand due to nerve damage, and tried to pin her against a wall, which requires leverage your spine cannot support." She looked at me. Physically, her story is impossible. If you had tried to lunge at her, your back would have given out instantly. You would have fallen, not overpowered a healthy 35-year-old woman. "Marion didn't care about physics," I said bitterly. "The law cares," Knox replied, "and so do I." "Now, about this security footage," Knox said. "You mentioned your son asked for it, and she said the file was corrupted?" "Yes. She said she messed it up trying to save it." Knox smirked. It was a cold, predatory smile. "That's the thing about modern smart homes. They don't just record to a memory card anymore. Marion uses the HomeGuard system. I checked the public IP registry. That system uploads everything to a cloud server instantly. Even if you delete it from the app on your phone, it stays in the provider's trash bin for 30 days specifically to prevent tampering." She stood up. "I'm going to pay your son a visit, and I'm going to get that footage." 2 days later, Marion was summoned to the hospital. He walked into the conference room looking 10 years older. He wouldn't look at me. Investigator Knox sat at the head of the table, a laptop open in front of her. Mr. Tate stood by the window. "Sit down, Marion," Knox commanded. "Is he okay?" Marion asked, gesturing vaguely toward me. "He nearly died of hypothermia because of you," Knox said, not looking up from her screen. "But we aren't here to talk about your parenting. We're here to watch a movie." She turned the laptop so Marion could see. "This is the footage recovered from your cloud account. Timestamp 7:50 p.m., 20 minutes before you arrived home." The video played. It showed Chandler standing in the hallway. I wasn't there. She walked to the hall mirror. She took a tube of lipstick and smeared it on her arm, then rubbed it vigorously with a rough towel until the skin was raw and red. Then she reached up and tore her own collar. She stared at herself in the mirror, practiced a scream, practiced crying. She checked her watch. She waited. Marion stared at the screen, his mouth slightly open. The color drained from his face, leaving him a sickly shade of gray. "Keep watching," Knox said. The video showed the moment Marion walked in. It showed me shuffling out with my walker, confused. It showed Chandler throwing herself into the performance. And it showed Marion, my son, grabbing a disabled man and dragging him away. Marion began to shake. She staged it. She was waiting for me. Why? I asked, my voice trembling. Why did she want me gone so bad she'd kill me for it? We found that out too, Knox said, sliding a bank statement across the table. Meet Travis, Knox said, dropping a photo of a man on top of the statement. He's a real estate developer. Chandler has been seeing him for 6 months. And this account? It's in her maiden name. She's been siphoning money from your joint savings, Marion. But the big prize was the house. Marion looked at the papers. I don't understand. She wanted to sell the house, Knox explained. She's been texting Travis about it, but she couldn't stage the house or get it listed with your invalid father cluttering up the guest room. She needed you to put him in a home or get rid of him so she could push for the sale. Take her half of the equity and run off with Travis. Getting you to kick him out was step 1. Marion put his head in his hands and let out a sound that wasn't quite a sob, but a moan of pure agony. I threw my dad into a blizzard for a woman who was robbing me. The next morning, the police asked Marion to call Chandler and tell her to come to the hospital to sign some discharge papers for me. She arrived looking annoyed, checking her watch, dressed in a sharp business suit. She walked into the room and stopped. I was sitting up in bed. Marion was standing by the window. Investigator Knox and 2 uniformed officers were waiting. What is this? She asked, feigning concern. Marion, honey, is he okay? Did you practice that line in the mirror too? Marion asked, his voice dead. Chandler froze. What? Knox turned the laptop around to show the freeze frame of Chandler tearing her own shirt. Chandler Willie, you are under arrest for filing a false police report, fraud, and elder abuse. As the officers handcuffed her, she didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She just glared at me with pure venom. You old leech, she spat. You just wouldn't die. Marion turned his back on her as they led her away. It has been 2 years. Chandler is serving 3 years in a state penitentiary. Marion divorced her, sold the house, and moved into a small apartment downtown. He pays for my rental here in Chicago, a few blocks from my sister. I look at my phone again. Can I come see you? I type back, yes, come over. But bring dinner. I hit send. The relationship isn't fixed. It might never be fully fixed. I love my son, but the memory of his hand gripping my arm will never fully fade. We are rebuilding, brick by brick, on a foundation of cautious truth. He visits, we talk about sports, we avoid the past, but he checks the weather now. He always makes sure I have a ride. He is trying. Family isn't just about blood. It's about who stands beside you when the storm comes. Sometimes, the people we trust most are the ones holding the knife. And sometimes, strangers like Sylvia and Investigator Knox are the ones who save us. If this story touched you, if you believe that truth eventually wins, please subscribe to the channel. Don't do it for me. Do it as a promise to yourself that you will never let a lie destroy a life. Do it to remind the world that justice exists, even if it takes a long, cold walk to find it. Thank you for listening.